It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast to tell you that US Cellular is introducing US Mode. It's kind of like airplane mode, but it's for people. It's a way to set up your phone so it doesn't get in the way of people really being with each other. Block distractions and make way for real connection. Give it a try. Visit US Cellular in-store or online, and they'll help you set up your phone for US Mode for free, even if you're not a customer. Built for superior 5G connection and real human connection. US Cellular, built for us. Find out more at uscellular.com/find us.
Before we get to even more Stanley Cup breakdowns, we got to continue our analysis of every single team in the NHL for their fantasy value and expectations for next season. We're going to get right to that for the New York Rangers on Wednesday's episode with a big-time special guest. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back inside the lab, everybody, and thank you for tuning in for the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And on today's episode, we're going to get started with a big-time special guest from the Locked On Rangers, Mr. John Chik, to talk about everything you need to know about what's going on in New York. So let's get him on here right now.
And here he is, John Chik, host of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. Make sure you subscribe and follow his podcast. Follow him on Twitter at jchick17 as well. And, of course, the Locked On New York Rangers Twitter, of course, too. John, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, having the Rangers expert on the show to help us break down everything that's going on this offseason as well as next season, fantasy-wise. And I want to jump into this right away. Of course, we're going to talk about the acquisitions of Tarasenko and Patrick Kane towards the end of the episode. We want to talk about Igor Shesterkin and a few young guys, but I want to jump in right into the conversation and start with the rumors surrounding the new head coaching position, Peter Laviolette being named that head coach potentially. Like, how do you feel about him potentially being the man at the wheel of this team? And when you look at his resume, his coaching record, do you believe that he can help this team get to the next level? Because they've been in the playoffs the last 4 years. You know, they made it to a conference finals, got beat by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Can Peter Laviolette be that guy to help them get over that hurdle?
Yeah, I mean, the phrase that I've kind of been using on my show, I did this in a recent episode regarding Peter Laviolette, because coming into this offseason, once Gallant was fired, I did kind of feel like he had a little bit of the inside track. You know, he probably was the most likely person to be the next head coach of this team. The phrase that I've used is it's an obnoxiously safe hire. You know what I mean? Like, there's part of me that really wants to see them roll the dice. You know, Chris Knobloch has done a nice job with their AHL team, the Hartford Wolfpack. You've got some other young coaches that were available around this league, Andrew Burnett and Jay Leach among them. And then you've got, you know, the candidates that are kind of on the NHL coaching carousel that we're also familiar with. These guys get just kind of bounce from one team to the next. And so, you know, as far as that type of a coach, which is the category that Laviolette fits into, it's not a bad hire at all. I mean, he clearly has a pretty successul track record. He's coached 5 teams. He's taken 3 of them to the Stanley Cup Finals. And when you look at his win-loss record, I was pretty surprised. I mean, I knew it was good, but when I looked into it this offseason, it's a pretty sparkling record. So Laviolette, he's one of those guys. He's going to walk into the room. I think he'll command a lot of respect and a lot of attention right away. He's just always kind of struck me as a no-nonsense kind of a coach. I think for Ranger fans, there will be a little bit of an adjustment period because we're so used to seeing him coach teams like the Flyers and the Capitals. And anytime Laviolette has coached one of those teams, it's gotten really nasty between that team and the Rangers. So it's going to take some time. It'll take some warming up too. But again, as far as the retreads are concerned, I think you could do worse than Laviolette. And it's a solid hire, if a ridiculously safe hire for the Rangers, if he is the guy.
100%. And actually, he's a bit of a Metro Division specialist. This is his 5th club that he's coached in this Metro Division. I don't know what that's going to mean for the overall success of the Rangers, but it can't hurt them going into this season. I think you're right on the money, though, John, with that safe hire. At the end of the day, too, he's the 8th winningest coach in NHL history. And when you're mentioning the other names in the conversation, Lindy Ruff, Paul Maurice, Laviolette, like you said, I don't think there's there's not a mistake here. To me, it's very much like what's going on with the Maple Leafs in terms of off the ice. It's all on the ice for me, right? We know the talent this Rangers team has. Shesterkin, we're going to talk about it, up front, loaded. But for me, at the end of the day, it's what can they do in the offseason with the roster? And we'll get there in a second. But what's your overall takeaway in this offseason? Laviolette, okay. What do they need to get done? What's at the top of the list? We'll talk a little bit about that. But for you, what do they really need to accomplish this offseason to be ready for October?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opinions out there with Ranger fans. It's a very passionate fan base. And, you know, there's all these kind of fantasy ideas of trade this guy or trade that guy. And I've been quick to remind everybody, no, he has a no-move clause. He has a no-move clause. He has a no-move clause, a partial no-move clause, on and on. So they've got precious little cap space to work with this offseason. And I think going into this next season, the team that you saw, you know, excluding the rental type players, the team that you saw the Rangers put on the ice at the end of this past season is largely what you're going to see for this upcoming season. I think there's going to be like a little bit of patchwork here and there. I know some Ranger fans, and I include myself in this, are excited about the idea of maybe you bring back Jesper Fast. You know, they're going to have to be smart with the money that they have. They don't have the kind of money to bring in one of the top guys in the free agent class, but you can add in, you know, some defensively responsible forwards. I'm going to do an episode in the future. We've already started looking at different UFAs from around the league, but I want to do an episode, or at least a couple of segments of an episode, where I try to find what I'm calling inexpensive speed. I think the Rangers could use a speed demon. I don't think they're like a slow team, but there's nobody other than maybe Kreider that really stands out as far as having a lot of speed and, you know, maybe a little bit more grit as well. I mean, every team in the league always wants to add more grit and more toughness. You know how it is, but I think the Rangers could stand to improve in that area as well. But it's going to be interesting because they have not a lot of money to work with. So they're going to have to be smart. You know, there's money ball in baseball. Rangers are going to have to play a little bit of money puck this offseason, I think.
Yeah, and every team always wants to add a physicality aspect to their game, a little bit more speed, something that the New York Rangers, you know, they could use a little bit more of for sure, but something that they have right now, that is a big question mark for me and maybe for a lot of fantasy owners out there, whether they should draft them or not, or whether they're going to, you know, continue to progress a little bit, is those three young guys on the third line, Lafreniere, Kakko, and Philip Hedl as well. Especially Lafreniere. You know, I recently watched your Lafreniere episode the other day about has he been a disappointment? What can you expect in the future? And for me, he really has been a little bit of disappointment. Like, no question, he's improved year after year after year, but it's been at a very slow pace. And for a guy who was drafted first overall, dominated the QMJHL, you know, back-to-back 100-plus point seasons, so much hype around him. It just seems like he doesn't have the confidence that he used to have when he was playing in Rimouski, and he doesn't have that confidence anymore in the NHL. Was that a part of Gerard Gallant's being the head coach and maybe not using and facilitating him properly? Maybe Peter Laviolette can come in and get Lafreniere and Kakko more offensively minded and get them going, what we've seen them do in the past when they were playing in junior and everything. So can Peter Laviolette maybe get a spark going for both Lafreniere, Kakko, and Hedl and really get those guys going offensively?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, with Gerard Gallant, you know, overall, I liked him as the Ranger coach, but one of his flaws, or at least what I felt in my very humble opinion, what one of his flaws was there were times where he was just kind of stubborn to a fault, where he would automatically, like, regardless of what was happening, just kind of default to giving top 6 minutes, giving power play time to veterans over some of the young guys. And granted, I mean, when you've got a roster of like Panarin and Mika and Kreider, and then you add Tarasenko and Kane, you can understand that a little bit. But yeah, there's times where it feels like he was hesitant to really give them, you know, a real opportunity. There was a time this past season where the Rangers were struggling, and they went to a top line left to right of Lafreniere, Mika, and Kakko. And I thought those three really clicked together. They eventually cooled off a little bit. The first couple of games, though, they looked great. They were setting each other up for some nice goals. And I wouldn't mind seeing a reunion of that trio going into this upcoming season. Let's just kind of throw the kids into the deep end. Kakko and Lafreniere, put them out there with Mika. I mean, he's one of the premier centers in this league. He can go out there and play with any two wingers. I think the two of them, you could include them in that group. And, I've noticed Lafreniere in particular. I've always wanted to see more of him and Mika together. The little they've played together over the past couple of years, I feel like they have a chemistry. They have kind of a sense of where the other one is going to be. So those two in particular, I'd really like to see them out there together. But as far as Laviolette, I'd have to go back and look at some of his rosters and, were there young kids that were, really excelling. But, I think he's done at least a little bit of that. I think at a certain point, you're going to see these kids, instead of just taking baby steps forward, hopefully this next season, it's kind of like a hop, skip, and a leap forward. And they get to that level that we expected them to, or at least somewhat close to that.
There's just so much talent there still. I don't think if I were the Rangers front office, I'm not ready to give up on Lafreniere or Kakko. Just so much ceiling still left to be untapped. Can it be Laviolette to get it done? No, we'll have John Chik back on later in the season. We'll come back to all these topics because as fantasy heads, we need to know what's going on month to month. We also need to know what's going on in that blue paint with the blue shirts. We're going to talk about Kane and Tarasenko around the break as well. But, we got to talk about our friends at FanDuel because today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You got to make your way over to FanDuel right now because new customers get a no sweat first bet for up to $2,000 back. That's actually $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't hit. And you know what we love about FanDuel? They got promotions every day, safe and secure app, and the payouts, you get them within 8 hours or instantly. There's no better place to bet all of the postseason action than at America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet to up to $2,500 back. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
The NHL playoffs are here, and this one goes out to the goalies, the last line of defense, the ones who can save a game all by themselves. You know who else makes game-changing saves? Discover. They have savings accounts that earn 5 times the national savings average in interest. Could you imagine a goalie with 5 times the saves? Instant Hall of Famer. So start making some game-changing saves for yourself and check out the savings account at Discover. Discover Bank, member FDIC. See terms and learn more at discover.com/savings.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues and including the NCAA, your team every single day. Remember to subscribe and to follow to both the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast and, of course, the Locked On Rangers Podcast with host John Chik. Follow John on all of his socials as well. You don't want to miss out on any of the episodes. He's breaking down everything you need to know New York Rangers this offseason as well. And again, thank you so much, John, for being with us today and breaking down some of the questions that we have for you. And I know, again, Flip and I talk a lot about the Rangers. We are blue shirt fans over here on this podcast. Big fans of a lot of the players, and including Igor Shesterkin. I don't think we can express the amount of love we have for Shesterkin in the New York Rangers organization. And I know Flip has some questions regarding the goalie situation, including the backup situation. Obviously, Halak was the backup last year, but Flip, I'll throw it over to you.
Appreciate that. At the end of the day, goaltending is obviously a very fickle situation, especially when it comes to the fantasy side of things. But I would say if there's one thing that Rangers fans and yourself, John, have in spades is Igor Shesterkin. And I know we saw a slight regression, still 10th in goals against, 10th in save percentage, and 3rd in wins last year. And if that's a regression, I'll take that goalie every single day. In my opinion, Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, Shesterkin, they're right there as a top 3. It could even be interchangeable after the year that we just saw. But I got to ask, is he going to be back to that Vezina level Shesterkin, or is this what we got to expect now? Still a top 10 goalie, but really when he came into the league, he was kind of like, he was stopping everything that he saw. And I think at the end of the day, he is going to be 28 years old this year. What's your prognostication on Shesterkin for this season? And I also need to know, where are they going for the backup?
Yeah, I certainly would not bet against Igor Shesterkin at some point eventually winning a second Vezina. You know, what he did 2 years ago was nothing short of remarkable. I've said on my show, you know, it's a goaltending season for the ages, and I would never hold him to that ridiculously high of a standard year in and year out. Very difficult position, you know, mental grind, physical grind. I know Igor just became a dad, coming into this past season, so I can relate to that. He's got a little bit more on his plate now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, yeah, I think for sure his floor is like a top 5 goalie in the league. And I think when he's at his absolute best, sure, he can win another Vezina. Yeah, I mean, I think the sky is the limit for him going forward, and he'll continue to be one of the truly elite goaltenders in this league. And, overall got a good, team around him and guys that, I think can certainly help him. Good defenseman out there. So, yeah, I think Igor Shesterkin year in and year out is going to put up excellent numbers. But what he did 2 years ago, I'm not sure when the next time is, not just from Igor, but really from any goalie in this league where we're going to see a season quite like that with those kinds of numbers and that kind of just dominance night in and night out. Never slumped the entire season, which when you have a goals against average like he had that year, that's pretty much what it takes. You can't have a single, rough stretch of games or anything along those lines. So, yeah, Igor, I mean, bet on him having another awesome season for fantasy purposes. I think for sure he should be one of the first 3 or at worst, the first 5 goalies off the board. Very safe floor and a pretty much limitless ceiling as well. And then as far as the backup is concerned, I did an episode not too long ago where we were kind of looking around the league and trying to figure out who that could be. You could always bring Yaroslav Halak back for another season. He did a good job last year after a little bit of a slow start. Yeah. He's a little bit older now. You've also got Louis Domingue in the AHL, which, I mean, you could go with him. It's an inexpensive option. David Riddick is among the backup goalies that are available. You could even throw Jonathan Quick in there as well if he wants to keep going after this season. So
I could actually see that. I could see Quick in New York.
They've got some options for sure. And of course, that's contingent on Quick accepting a backup job. But by that same token, at this point, he might not really have a choice. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's at least possible. And he's actually from Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe playing back home at this point of his career or close to home would be appealing to him. But they've got some options. And we'll see how the whole thing shakes out here.
Yeah, very impressive from Igor Shesterkin, of course. Like a little bit of a regression season, but always a top 5 goaltender. I think he was top 2 actually in our fantasy league flip. Taken in the first round.
Nasty.
So he's definitely
just so nasty.
Yeah, he's such a good goalie, and the mobility and the flexibility that this guy has from getting from post to post is almost just unfathomable. You see it from just a handful of goalies in the NHL. He's one of the best right now, and he had a lot on his plate. He did have a lot on his plate this year, especially, again, like you said, Halak just having a very slow start. Not really every time it seemed like to me when Halak was in the crease, the Rangers were just losing those games. And so a slow start for Halak put a lot of pressure on Shesterkin on his shoulders to win those extra games down the stretch and kind of get the Rangers up into the standings a little bit. And one of those teams that they had to battle with, of course, was the New Jersey Devils. And what a first round playoff series it was against the New York Rangers and the Devils. Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but I am again, we are blue shirt fans on this podcast. I had the New York Rangers winning the Stanley Cup this past year. I had them winning the Stanley Cup 2 years ago as well. I've been so high on this team and all of their superstars up front. But I know, again, I'll throw it back over to Flip because of the series against the Devils and the Rangers in the first round.
I just want to keep it simple for you, John. I need to know, and I know you're obviously a Rangers fan, but you cover this team unbiasedly as well. That was a 7-game battle, and it was awesome to watch as just a hockey fan, and I really do think the Metro Division is still the toast of the NHL. So when you talk about what's on Shesterkin's plate as well, he has to face some really good teams every single week within his own division. So there's another caveat there. But do you think the Rangers are still the best team in this Metro Division? Or how is it going to be now, potentially playing second fiddle to this young upstart Devils team who obviously doesn't have the experience or the goaltending, but they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in this division for a number of years?
Yeah, see, to me right now, I would still put the Canes ahead of both of those teams.
Okay.
When you can continually win, what you guys just said was probably the best division in hockey. When you consistently are at the top of that division and you're always a threat, it seems like you're always making a pretty deep playoff run. I mean, I know that the pressure is going to be mounting for the Canes to at least make it to the finals, if not win the Stanley Cup, because they've been in the mix for a while and can't quite get over the hump. But when you consistently win that division and do so pretty comfortably, I don't remember the standings being all that close. I think we pretty much knew the Canes were going to take it getting toward the end of this past regular season. To me, to be the best, you got to beat the best. And the Canes, I know the Rangers got them in the playoffs 2 years ago, but The Canes, they continue to get it done. I think it's a tremendously well-coached team, very deep team, good defenseman. Antti Ranta, former Ranger, very underrated goalie in my very humble opinion. Just a really strong team with very few weak points. So to me, that's still kind of the cream of the crop in the Metro. As far as the Devils are concerned, I mean, I've done a bunch of crossovers with Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils, and we always have a lot of fun with that. But we've been talking about this, man. Even back when both teams were rebuilding and trying to put all the pieces back together, it was like, man, both these teams, they're on their way, and even back when both teams were still struggling, they would play each other and it would have kind of a big game feel to it. And now that both teams are good again and both a threat again, I mean, it's more fun than it's ever been, this Ranger-Devil rivalry. It wasn't a lot of fun for us as Ranger fans in the playoffs this year. But, you get the point that I'm making here. That rivalry is back in full force. And those two teams, man, they're going to be going at it for a lot of years to come here, I think.
And actually, at the end of the day, to your point, Carolina actually finishes only 1 point clear of the Devils, 6 points clear of the Rangers. I just think these three teams are going to be going at it at the top of this division still for the next couple of years. You allude to Carolina's future a little bit, but the Devils and the Rangers aren't going anywhere, especially with the anchors that they have on both sides of the puck. Keandre Miller, we haven't talked about. I don't know if we're going to get there. To me, he's right on the cusp of being me, Steele, when it comes to my Keandre Miller takes. This guy does a little bit of everything fantasy-wise, and we haven't even seen the best from him yet. You'll see the best from us, though, right after the break, Steele, if you want to take us there.
Yeah, a lot to talk about. We could probably squeeze Keandre Miller in there as well. We're going to be talking about a few UFAs, real quick, veteran UFAs of the New York Rangers.
What's up, everybody? David Harrison here of the Locked On Commanders podcast. When life gets crazy, and honestly, when doesn't it? Walmart helps you keep it all together now with a little extra help from Instacart. If you need your groceries now-ish, but your options for going to Walmart are later-ish or never-ish, you can get everything you need delivered through Instacart right to your door in as fast as an hour. Skip the shop and savor more of your crazy busy life with Walmart and Instacart. Visit instacart.com to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast to draw your attention to the taste that's going down in the bread aisle. All thanks to Dave's Killer Bread, bread amplified. Anyone can bake bread, few can rock it, and Dave's Killer Bread is the champion of killer taste, killer texture, and is for those who want to rise above the boring. Organic and healthy doesn't have to mean boring when it's made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients, packed with whole grains, fiber, and protein. 21 whole grains and seeds bread has a subtle sweetness and a seed-coated crust, while Good Seed products are the boldest and sweetest of all. Dave's Killer Bread was built on the belief that second chances can change lives, because after spending 15 years in prison, not only did the guy with the guitar you see on every loaf turn his own life around, he's helping others to do the same. By hiring the best people for the job, regardless of their background, he's ensuring your mornings no longer taste like cardboard, your taste buds don't have to feel sedated, and your sandwiches can become superstars. Visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your favorite grocery store.
But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues, including the NCAA, your team every single day. And of course, make sure you follow and subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, as well the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. Follow John Chik on Twitter at jchick17 as well, and all of his social medias. Again, you don't want to miss out all of the analysis and breakdowns of the New York Rangers this offseason, the draft coming up, of course, everything free agent wise when it comes into July as well. But John Chik will have the answers for all of us and all of you fantasy owners out there, including some of these veteran RFAs for the New York Rangers. Obviously, they acquired Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane at the trade deadline this past year. Both guys are UFAs heading into the offseason. Patrick Kane, 34 years old. Vladimir Tarasenko, 31 years old. First of all, I want your quick opinion on how they did in their short stint in the regular season, as well as the first round against the New Jersey Devils in the playoffs. And do you believe that they will re-sign with the New York Rangers potentially this offseason, and again, maybe form some chemistry like Patrick Kane and Artemi Panarin used to have in Chicago? Maybe Vladimir Tarasenko can continue his hot play with the Rangers next season. Do you believe that they'll re-sign this offseason?
I don't, and it's mostly because of just the aforementioned salary cap situation we talked about, not that long ago. With Tarasenko, man, I would love to have him back. I thought overall, not like sparkling offensive numbers, but I just thought that he checked a lot of boxes for the Rangers. They were very thin at right wing before they traded for him this past season. They needed to go out and get one of the bona fide top right wingers that was going to be available at the trade deadline this past season. They did that with Vladimir Tarasenko. Seems like he fit right in with the Rangers as far as like the culture is concerned and the style of play. For a while there, they were going with Panarin, Mika, and Tarasenko on the top line. And the three of them, man, I mean, they looked dangerous every time they were on the ice. Some of these rushes into the zone, I mean, you're just waiting for, like a magician type goal where they just kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat kind of a deal. Tarasenko, again, and he's not afraid to shoot the puck. And I think that's something that the Rangers were lacking before they brought him in is they want somebody who's a little bit of a sniper, and Tarasenko can certainly give you that. So I'd love to have him back, but he's just 31 years old, and I feel like he's going to have no shortage of suitors this offseason. I know, he's had the shoulder surgeries, so maybe that scares away a couple of teams, but I get the feeling he's looking at a pretty good deal and a pretty decent length of contract as well, and one that the Rangers just probably are not going to be able to afford. Never say never. They could always make a couple of trades, open up some cap space. It's always possible. Yep. But if I had to bet, I would say he's probably playing elsewhere. And for Patrick Kane, I don't know how much the hip injury was slowing him down, but I was really surprised by what they got out of Kane, which is to say not the Patrick Kane that I think we're all used to. For some reason, it just felt like he never really, forget about the hockey perspective for a second. It just felt like he never really clicked with his new teammates. I don't know if you guys picked up on this as well watching this. Something always just felt like it was a little off. Like anytime they showed him on the bench, he was just kind of staring off into space. Like I don't think I ever saw him talk to a teammate when he was sitting on the bench. And look, good point. It's possible I'm overanalyzing this. I'm not seeing everything that happens behind the scenes and everything. But that's just kind of what I saw. And as far as like his play on the ice, he just didn't seem to be a player that was carrying himself with the confidence, with the bluster that you would expect from somebody that's won 3 Stanley Cups, might be the best American-born hockey player of all time. Something just was a little bit off. Something just didn't click. And, game 2, we got a little bit of throwback Patrick Kane. He kind of took over that game. I believe 2 goals and an assist, a couple of highlight reel plays. But, man, that stuff was few and far between with Patrick Kane on the Rangers. The reason why I would say it's possible that he's back next year, and I talked about this on my show too, is maybe he, having the hip surgery and everything, ends up signing like a 1-year prove-it deal. There were all these rumors that he really wanted to come to the Rangers, so maybe he sticks around for like 1 year and like $5 million, but even that I'm not sure the Rangers could afford. So, gonna be interesting. And regardless of whether he's back with the Rangers or not, I feel like he's gonna have one of the more interesting free agent markets of any player available this offseason.
Totally agree. And I think you've alluded to a point that a lot of good teams in the East and actually in the West, basically every single team that has cup aspirations is going to get very, very tricky for them in terms of the cap. So this offseason, we know the cap's going up, like 1 million and change. That's really not going to do too much for these GMs. They're going to have to get creative. And I think that's really going to lead to a bit of a crazy offseason because I think you're going to have, you just mentioned it. I think some of these GMs are going to have to wheel and deal. They're going to have to give up maybe some pieces for some other teams to take on some contracts so they can get in the players they need. You alluded to what the Rangers have to do. Also, I alluded to it before the break, and he is a restricted free agent, I believe, Mr. Keandre Miller. Let me just double check that.
Yep.
Restricted free agent at 23 years old. This past season, I also mentioned it. He hits, he blocks shots, he chips in offensively. 43 points this year. I need to ask about him very quickly. My last question for you, John. 43 points. Are we seeing him just scraping the surface offensively, or are we expecting 40, 45 points and a whole bunch of peripheral categories from Mr. Miller?
There's certainly still some upside there. And, overall, I think Keandre Miller, what he's given the Rangers over the first 3 seasons of his career, I think as a fan of this team, you have to be happy with it. We know, all of us as Ranger fans, that this team has certainly swung and missed on some draft picks in the past. That was the year that they had 3 first-round draft picks, and the other 2 other than Miller were Nils Lundqvist and Vitaly Krasov. And obviously it didn't work out with those 2. So the fact that Miller, kind of took the bull by the horns a couple off seasons ago and was kind of a surprise opening night starter. Nobody was really expecting him to make the team out of training camp, but he did. And again, kind of just took the bull by the horns, ran with it, and is entrenched himself in the top 4 for the Rangers. I thought this past season, him and Trouba was playing through some injuries, so maybe that threw both of them off. I thought they got off to just a miserable start for the Rangers.
True.
But after like the first quarter of the season, I thought they both, pulled it together. And Miller certainly has some upside. I feel like, 45 points or so, that's probably about where he'll eventually settle in. Although you never know. I mean, if he was to end up on some other team, which I don't want to happen, but it's entirely possible he gets more power play time, so that leads to more points as well. So that's, certainly a possibility. But I would imagine the Rangers want to get something done with him. I'm looking at maybe like a 2-year bridge deal kind of situation.
Me too.
And it's so hard to predict these contracts, but maybe somewhere between like $3 million and $3.5 million, somewhere in that ballpark would be about right for Miller. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm hoping that Miller, eventually becomes a pillar for this team. And I realize you can't keep everybody. You got the salary cap situation, but hopefully he sticks around because overall he's been a very good player for this team.
Agreed.
Very good player. The Rangers have a lot of good players moving forward, and no short of talent for the New York Rangers. And hopefully, again, they can acquire some stuff offseason, move some pieces to see what can happen in the future for next season. But thank you so much, John, for joining us for today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and breaking down all of our questions fantasy-wise. We cannot wait to see the New York Rangers back in action next year. The blue shirts over here. Let's go Rangers. Let's go Rangers, of course. Artemi Panarin, my boy. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when you can find all of our episodes. And of course, make sure you go follow and subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. Follow John Chik at JChick17. Of course, breaking down everything you need to know New York Rangers wise. And again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I and John, our special guest for today. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there if you have any. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
Buying tickets to see your favorite NHL team shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.